My name is Amy Klockowski. Our camera person is Katie Gomez. We're interviewing from Rome Free Academy. We're interviewing Lieutenant Virginia Peel from the Navy Waves, and today's date is November 1st.
Well, I don't know whether I can, what you want in these, so.
Good morning. Could you please state your name and branch of service?
I'm Virginia Hyland Peel, and I was in the Waves. That was better known as the Women's Auxiliary Volunteer Emergency Service.
During World War II, did you enlist or were you drafted?
Neither. There was a class sent to Smith College of 1,000 women. We had to take an exam, and we represented every state in the Union, and we were to go to relieve men, take their jobs, their shore jobs, and go to let the men go to sea. So there were 1,000 of us who went to Smith College.
Okay. Now, your family, I see, was all in the Navy, so they were pretty happy with your decision?
Oh yes, they were delighted. I grew up in the Navy as a Navy junior, and my father was, he was the class of 1900 from the Naval Academy, and my brothers were 1934 and 35 from the Naval Academy. So it was just like almost everybody in the family was in the Navy.
Now, what made you decide to join this branch of the military?
Well, just because I loved being in the Navy, growing up in it, and so.
Now, were there any special qualifications to get into the Waves?
Well, as officer candidates, we pretty much had to have a college education, and we took exams. And then we went to Smith College for 3 months and came out as ensigns in the Navy. And at Smith College, this whole class of 1,000 were made what they call communicators. And so we had desk jobs. And it had mostly to do with coding and decoding of messages.
Okay. Did you specifically, what duties did you perform in the Waves?
Well, I started off, I worked, I was sent, my orders sent me to Boston to what was called the Northern Group of the Eastern Sea Frontier. And when we first came there, why, we were all communicators. But as time went on, I was in that office for 4 years. And I became, at one point, an air combat information officer, which is a little bit like a librarian. I was a ship controller, an air controller, and we worked in this operations office and more or less plotted all the ships and airplanes that, I forgot to tell them that at one point, that we that went in and out of Boston and New York.
Because you worked with ships, what effect did it have on you after Pearl Harbor, after that attack? On your unit, did your unit have to do anything different in their duties, or?
Well, I was, at the time, I wasn't in the service at the time of Pearl Harbor, because the Waves didn't start until I went in October of '42, and came out as an ensign in January of '43. I stayed until 1946, when I got out to get married.
Now, what was your working schedule like in the Waves? Your hours?
Crazy. We were on 2 days, we were on 2 days, 8 to 4, 4 to 11 or midnight at night, and 4 midnight to 8 in the morning. then we had a 48 off. So you never got used to anything. It was very hard to sleep because you were going around the clock.
Now, did you perform any unusual services while in the waves? I read about something with a captain, for example.
Oh, when the head of the waves, Captain Macafee, when she came to Boston, I was made her aide for the day, and that I enjoyed very much.
Now, your family was all in the Navy. Where were they
Yes.
stationed during World War II?
My father was stationed at in Boston. He was, what did they call him? Inspector of Naval Material in Boston. And my two brothers were in various parts of the Pacific, on various ships. My oldest brother was a flyer, and he was the last plane to get out of out of Manila, and when the Japanese attacked, and he was lucky to get out, and he flew to Australia.
Okay, what ranks were they in the military?
Well, my oldest one, the one who was a flyer, ended up as a full admiral, and he commanded the Pacific Fleet. That was his last, duty. And my father was a captain, and my other brother was retired as a captain too.
Okay. During the war, what was your most memorable experience? What's the one thing that stands out to you as your favorite experience during your services?
Well, I did think the one that was fun was that I had to lead the singing when we were in Smith College, and it would be very cold, and we would be marching to meals, and I would always have to lead the singing. But as I've said so often, they didn't have anybody who could blow taps, so they had me sing it at the bottom of the stairs of the dorm every night before the midshipmen went to sleep. I would sing taps.
Now, I read that you flew in the nose of a B-17. What happened there?
Oh, there were three of us who went around together, and we were on leave, and one of my friends, her brother was stationed in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and the admiral's plane was being overhauled at Quonset, which is in Rhode Island. It was one of the air stations there. So we were going to Puerto Rico on this airplane, but unfortunately it took too long to get repaired, and the pilot suggested that we hitch rides via the Army or the Navy or whatever we could find to Miami, and then he would pick us up there and take us over to Puerto Rico. And that's when one of the planes was a B-17, in which I flew in the nose of it, which is all glass and very scary.
Now, what were your feelings when you heard that Japan had surrendered towards the end of the war?
Complete and utter relief that men were coming, and women were going to be coming home.
Now, did you receive any medals during World War II?
Just the general ones that the Waves had, because we were not allowed to go overseas, and we couldn't go over for about 2.5 years, and by that time the war, the skipper in our office wouldn't let us go over anyway. He kept us there, but the war was, easing down then.
What were the general medals of the Waves?
I wish I could tell you, and right now I don't, you know, I don't know.
So proud.
I don't remember.
Now, when you came home, were there any ceremonies? Was everyone warming you back, welcoming you back nicely?
No, because I just, at that point, we got out singly, you know, at different times. And I got out because I was going to get married. And so.
Okay, now, was it difficult for you to adjust back to civilian lifestyle?
Yes, very much so. I guess I always thought I'd marry in the service, and I was so used to moving that to live in one place took me a long time to adjust. And just when I thought I was adjusting to it, and we came up to Rome, New York, and moved.
Now, what did you do after your service? What jobs did you work in?
I didn't, because I got married, and then I just had a family. And so I stayed home for about 19 years. But during that time, I did a lot of volunteer work. And then I helped set up a elementary school library. And that led to my taking an exam for a librarian in Waterbury, Connecticut.
Now, I see you have a lot of pictures with you. Who are in these pictures?
Well, this little one is when I was at Smith College as a midshipman. And this one is when I was a junior grade lieutenant in the Navy. I did end up as a full lieutenant. And
Now, how do they move people up in rank?
back then, it was just a general. Everybody who had been in certain class, except when I became a lieutenant, one of my best friends, who had been 2 classes behind me, was made a lieutenant commander because there was a space in the office for her. But none of us in our office who were in the first class, we still stayed lieutenants, and that wasn't fair. So this is a picture of my father and me.
Now, where is that taken?
It's taken in Newtonville, Massachusetts, when I first went to Boston. And at that time I lived at home because my father was stationed there.
Did you have to work under your father in the office?
No, I didn't. He was in a different office completely.
Now, what are the pictures of these ships over here?
Oh, many years ago, and I wish I could tell you the name of the ship. These are pictures of a ship my father commanded, which catapulted the first airplane off.
Was that taken in the Pacific?
I honestly don't know whether it was I would imagine it would have been the Atlantic because of Pensacola down there. This is a picture of my father on his last ship command was the battleship Nevada. And he's there with my dog, Jerry.
Now, is that part of your uniform for the Waves? What are the difference between those 2 hats you have there?
Oh, this is the officer's hat that they wore mostly, you know, for dress. And this was one that you would wear when, well, you wore your raincoat, and it wasn't as dressy to wear.
Now, is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your services?
Well, I can't think of anything. I wish I'd been able to stay in the reserves, but back then they didn't allow it. And by the time I could, why, I would have been too old to go back in the service. But I wish I could have been able to stay in the reserves and kept in touch that way.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Well, I thank you. I've enjoyed this so much.